September 20, 1944. Araur, France, until 2:47 p.m. as the morning mist began to dissipate. Major Charles Carpenter spotted a formation of German armor advancing across open fields towards American positions from his Piper L-4 Grasshopper cockpit. The aircraft was never intended for such missions, yet here he was about to undertake an extraordinary task. If we're going to fight a war, he had told a Stars and Stripes correspondent just days earlier, we need to be ready 24 hours a day. This statement encapsulated the philosophy of the man who turned an unarmed observation plane into one of history's most improbable tank destroyers. The Major, a former high school history teacher from Illinois, had ingeniously attached 6 bazookas to his lightweight aircraft. Unbeknownst to the German tank crews, their formidable Panthers and Tigers were about to face an unlikely foe, a flimsy fabric-covered plane weighing just 220 pounds, piloted by what the Germans would later dub the Mad Major. The odds seemed insurmountable. The L-4's meager 65 horsepower engine produced less power than a Tiger tank's cooling fan. With a maximum speed of only 85 mph, it was slower than a Panther could traverse its turret. Its cotton fabric exterior could be pierced by a pistol bullet. Despite these apparent disadvantages, 2 Panther tanks were left smoking in the French countryside that day, their crews bewildered to have been defeated by what appeared to be a civilian training aircraft. The Battle of Araur marked Germany's last significant armored counteroffensive in France. General Hasso von Mantefel's 5th Panzer Army had assembled an impressive force of 262 tanks and assault guns, including the elite 113th and 114th Panzer Brigades alongside the experienced 11th Panzer Division. This formidable unit included 107 Panthers and 75 Panzers supported by 80 assault guns, all aimed at halting Patton's advance towards the German border. Among this powerful contingent was the newly formed 113th Panzer Brigade, equipped with some of Germany's most advanced tanks. The Panthers advancing that morning epitomized German engineering prowess, each armed with a high-velocity 75 mm gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at distances over 2,000 meters. The front armor of these formidable machines was sloped at a 55-degree angle and measured 80 mm thick, providing excellent protection against most Allied anti-tank weaponry. However, they had one significant weak point that their creators never anticipated. The roof armor ranged from just 16 to 25 mm on Panthers and 25 mm on Tigers, leaving them vulnerable to attacks from above. German engineers focused on defending against ground threats, failing to consider the possibility of aerial assault with infantry weapons. Throughout World War II, German military doctrine classified observation planes like the L-4 Grasshopper as harmless reconnaissance aircraft best left unharmed to avoid revealing positions and drawing artillery fire. Engaging them would only confirm their location to Allied observers. Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, who commanded the 58th Panzer Corps, later evaluated these newly formed Panzer brigades as having limited combat effectiveness due to incomplete training and equipment shortages. These units lacked proper reconnaissance capabilities and were forced to advance into American-held territory with little information about enemy positions. Charles Carpenter was born on August 29, 1912, in rural Illinois, where his farming family struggled during the Great Depression. His parents' divorce left him and his siblings working on neighboring farms to support their impoverished household. Despite these hardships, he excelled academically and received scholarships for military education at Roosevelt Military Academy in Aledo, Illinois, and Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Before World War II, Carpenter taught history at Moline High School, where he met and married Elder Frattel in 1940. They had a daughter named Carol. When the United States entered the war in 1942, the then 30-year-old teacher enlisted and was commissioned as a second lieutenant, completing his flight training soon after. By 1944, he had been promoted to major and assigned to the 1st Bombardment Division in France before being transferred to fly artillery support missions for General George S. Patton's 4th Armored Division. His primary responsibility involved conducting reconnaissance and artillery spotting flights in an L-4H Grasshopper, which was also known as the Piper J-3 Cub. He also acted as General John's personal pilot and was given considerable leeway by Wood, the commander of the 4th Armored Division. His assigned bearing serial number 43-326 would soon earn a name that echoed Rosie the Riveter, but with a twist, Rosie the Rocketer. In August 1944, Carpenter penned a letter to Elder stating, "Lately I have been taking quite a few risks, yet my luck has held up remarkably well. Yesterday a bullet pierced through the wing, and one of our wheels hit a church steeple. Barely more than what could happen under such circumstances." His approach to warfare was straightforward: attack relentlessly. As he once explained to Associated Press reporter Wes Gallagher, "My strategy in war is simpler: attack, attack, and keep attacking." Carpenter wasn't the first to arm an L-4 plane with weaponry. Lieutenants Harley Merrick and Roy Carson had previously mounted bazookas on their observation aircraft, successfully destroying 2 German trucks. However, Carpenter refined this technique and took it to new heights. His modifications started with attaching 2 M1A1 bazookas to the wing struts. Collaborating with ordnance technicians, he devised a mounting system using plywood plates to evenly distribute weight and recoil across the delicate wing structure. Electrical wiring connected from the launch tubes to cockpit toggle switches for individual or simultaneous firing of rockets. Early tests revealed issues: the M1A1 bazookas, equipped with 2 36-inch diameter rockets capable of penetrating around 3 inches of armor, sufficient for light vehicles but inadequate against tanks, needed improvement. Carpenter then upgraded to 6 M9 bazookas and used the improved M6 and A3 He-8 rockets, which could penetrate up to 3.9 inches of armor at a 30-degree angle, enough to neutralize any German tank's top armor. The full modification added about 106 pounds to an aircraft already operating near its weight limit. At a maximum gross weight limit of 12 to 20 pounds, the pilot, fuel, and essential equipment consumed most of this capacity, leaving no room for an additional passenger. Thus, Carpenter flew solo, with the observer's seat remaining vacant due to insufficient lift capability. The aerodynamic consequences were substantial. The presence of bazookas created significant drag, further diminishing the already limited top speed and exacerbating the plane's sluggish maneuverability during turns. Originally intended for mild observation missions, this aircraft now carried weaponry comparable to half a dozen infantry anti-tank squads. The technical difficulties involved in targeting tanks from an L4 were considerable. With no gun sight or advanced aiming system beyond the pilot's judgment, the fixed orientation of the bazookas required Carpenter to align the entire plane directly with his target. The M6A3 rockets had an effective range of around 300 yards, but accuracy declined sharply beyond 100 yards. To overcome these challenges, Carpenter devised a distinctive attack strategy. Starting at an altitude of approximately 1,500 feet, he would initiate a corkscrew descent to disorient anti-aircraft gunners and obscure his flight path from ground forces. This spiraling approach made it difficult for enemy fighters to anticipate his movements and adjust their aim accordingly. Upon reaching around 300 feet, Carpenter would level off momentarily, align himself with the target, then commence a steep dive. The final assault demanded exceptional courage. At just 100 yards, about 300 feet from the objective, he would activate his firing mechanisms, launching rockets toward the enemy armor. Immediately after releasing the rockets, he would pull up sharply to escape return fire, exploiting every ounce of the L4's limited power to gain altitude rapidly. The entire sequence, from initiating the dive to recovering and climbing away, lasted less than 30 seconds but was fraught with peril. The Continental Li-65 engine labored under the extra weight and drag imposed by the rocket installation, reducing the plane's normal climb rate from 450 feet per minute to just over 200 feet per minute when fully loaded. Each foot gained in elevation offered a critical advantage, adding another second beyond small arms range and more time to devise subsequent assaults. On September 20, 1944, dense fog blanketed the area, preventing most aircraft from taking off. Combat Command A under Colonel Bruce C. Clark was stationed near Araur when intelligence indicated an imminent German armor offensive. Despite adverse weather conditions, Carpenter decided to launch his mission, confident that visibility would improve eventually. By noon, as the fog began to dissipate, Carpenter was already aloft, scouring the landscape for potential targets. Below him lay elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade advancing in formation over open terrain towards American defenses. The German tank crews were accustomed to searching for enemy armor and anti-tank artillery, but did not perceive the small reconnaissance aircraft circling overhead as a threat. Carpenter initiated his attack run, diving sharply into what had become his signature maneuver. As he plummeted at an intense angle, the plane shook violently due to the increasing speed. At exactly 100 yards from the target, he released 6 rockets aimed directly at the leading Panther tank's thinly armored roof, causing a direct hit and igniting flames inside the vehicle. The damaged tank halted abruptly, belching smoke through its hatches. Carpenter swiftly banked left and ascended as German machine gun fire erupted around him. He could feel bullets piercing his aircraft fabric covering during his ascent to higher altitudes. After landing, reloading ammunition, and refueling, within half an hour he returned to the skies once more. Upon his second sortie, he discovered that the German tanks were trying to regroup their formation. They had dispersed themselves, making it harder for enemies to hit them, but also slowing their advance. Carpenter picked another Panther and dove once more. This time the Germans were prepared. Small arms fire filled the air around his plane. The sound of bullets ripping through fabric accompanied him throughout the dive, yet his aim stayed true. Another Panther was eliminated, its turret crew killed when a blast penetrated the 60 mm roof armor. On his third sortie that day, Carpenter observed the surviving tanks starting to retreat, their advance thoroughly disrupted. By the end of the day, he had fired 16 rockets in total. 2 Panther tanks were confirmed destroyed, halting the German offensive, and thus the legend of Bazooka Charlie was born. The 4th Armored Division's official history would later highlight his role in stopping a German counterattack. Prior to Carpenter's attacks, German military doctrine considered observation aircraft insignificant distractions. Standard protocol dictated ignoring them unless they posed an immediate threat. Engaging these planes could reveal positions and draw artillery fire, which was deemed unfavorable tactics. However, this calculation shifted entirely after news spread about rocket-armed L-4s. Urgent bulletins were issued to German units warning them about American observation planes equipped with anti-tank weapons. What had once been harmless spotters now posed a significant threat that demanded immediate attention. Carpenter himself noted the change immediately when he told a Stars and Stripes reporter, "Every time I show up now, they shoot at me with everything they have. They used to ignore Cubs completely. Bazookas must be bothering them." The effect on German operations extended beyond just the tanks destroyed. Tank commanders were now required to keep vigilant watch on the skies for slow-moving aircraft. As L-4s approached, formations had to disperse, which disrupted their cohesion and momentum. Anti-aircraft defenses needed to shift from targeting fighter bombers to engaging observation planes. Infantry units received orders to engage any L-4 with rifles and machine pistols, creating a dense wall of fire that made low-altitude operations increasingly dangerous. By the end of the first week in the Battle of Araur, the 11th-13th Panzer Brigade had lost 63 tanks from an initial count of 90, although not all these losses can be directly attributed to Carpenter's actions. His strike significantly contributed to the psychological pressure that undermined German combat efficiency. Tank crews who previously felt relatively secure in poor weather conditions now faced a threat that could materialize at any moment. In October 1944, Carpenter refined his tactics and increased his effectiveness. By then well known within the Third Army, he was granted freedom to pursue targets of opportunity. During this month alone, he claimed 4 more tanks destroyed along with an armored truck, bringing his official tally to 6 tanks destroyed, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks. On October 4th, near Chateau Sala, Carpenter intercepted a German armor column attempting a counterattack. Despite intense small arms fire, he successfully struck a Panzer IV tank directly on its engine deck, causing it to catch fire and block a narrow road, effectively trapping the vehicles behind it and making them easy targets for American tank destroyers. A week later, near Moncourt Woods, Carpenter spotted Tiger tanks supporting a German infantry assault. These formidable machines were armed with powerful 88 mm guns and featured heavy armor up to 100 mm thick on their front hulls, but had vulnerable roof armor only 25 mm thick. Each Tiger weighed an impressive 57 tons. Carpenter's attack on these Tigers demanded extraordinary courage, as they were usually protected by infantry and light anti-aircraft weapons specifically designed to fend off air threats. He dove through a barrage of tracer fire, released his rockets at close range, and pulled away just in time to witness explosions erupting behind him. One Tiger was confirmed destroyed when its ammunition detonated in a massive explosion. The consequences went beyond mere physical damage. German tank crews, already strained by American technological advantages, now had an additional threat from an unexpected source. They could no longer rely on hiding under trees for cover because the L-Force could still spot them. The noise of small aircraft engines could not be disregarded either, as any one of these planes might carry weapons. Every flight Carpenter undertook pushed the limits of both physics and chance. Designed originally without combat in mind, the L-4 had non-self-sealing fuel tanks, making it extremely vulnerable. A single tracer round could ignite the entire plane into flames. The pilot was encased in nothing but exposed steel tubing and fabric, fully susceptible to enemy fire. In his letters home, which were meticulously censored to reassure his wife, Carpenter alluded to the dangers he faced. Following one mission, he simply noted, "Had some excitement today. The plane has a few more holes, but it still flies well." However, what he did not mention was that these holes represented near misses that could have severed control cables, ruptured fuel lines, or hit him directly. Ground crews who maintained Rosie the Rocketer began keeping informal records of damage sustained. After especially intense missions, they would find dozens of bullet holes needing repair. One crew chief allegedly informed other pilots that Carpenter's aircraft resembled Swiss cheese after a particular engagement. Despite this, both pilot and plane continued to function. The psychological strain was considerable. Unlike bomber pilots who operated at 20,000 feet and were largely detached from the combat action, Carpenter engaged in close quarters fighting. He could clearly see individual German soldiers shooting at him and observe the expressions on tank commanders' faces as they comprehended the situation. The nature of his combat was intensely personal and immediate. Wes Gallagher, an Associated Press reporter who frequently interviewed Carpenter, wrote about him in Liberty magazine, describing the Major as a legend within a unit known for its daring acts. However, Gallagher also noticed signs of fatigue in Carpenter's eyes, reflecting someone who had repeatedly pushed the limits and understood the risks involved. The bazooka set up on Carpenter's L-4 aircraft underwent continuous modifications based on combat experience. Initially, metal brackets were used to mount the weapon, but these proved ineffective as recoil forces loosened them over time. Plywood backing plates provided better support for the mounting system, but added significant weight to an already heavily loaded plane. The electrical firing mechanism posed specific challenges. Wiring had to be carefully routed through the wings and into the cockpit, safeguarded from both environmental elements and enemy fire. Toggle switches were positioned within easy reach of the pilot's right hand, allowing control over individual rockets or rapid bursts. The system needed to remain functional after prolonged periods of vibration and extreme maneuvers, while also being simple enough for basic repair. Aiming was entirely visual and intuitive. Carpenter devised his own set of reference points, using features like the engine cowling, cockpit framework, and even marks on the windscreen as aiming guides. He calculated lead angles based on approach speed and dive angle, accounting for wind drift and rocket trajectory. There was no fallback option. If a shot missed, he had to ascend under enemy fire and attempt another strike. The rockets themselves presented their own set of unique difficulties. The M6A3-8 rounds were intended for use in ground combat scenarios. They could be fired by infantrymen from their shoulders at stationary targets, but became less accurate when launched from a moving aircraft. The rocket motor ignited and burned for just 0.3 seconds, propelling the round to its maximum velocity rapidly before it coasted towards the target. Various factors such as wind conditions, aircraft movement, and inherent inaccuracies of the rockets themselves made precise targeting difficult even with perfect aim. The Battle of Araur, where Carpenter's most famous victory occurred, was more than a mere tactical engagement. It marked the largest tank battle on the Western Front, during which American forces managed to destroy 200 German tanks and assault guns while suffering only 25 losses of their own. The Germans had devised a plan for the 5th Panzer Army to break through the American lines and recapture Nancy, thereby jeopardizing Patton's entire advance. This offensive force included some of Germany's best remaining armored units, though many were understaffed and hastily reorganized following setbacks in Normandy. Carpenter's unit, the 4th Armored Division, bore the brunt of this German assault despite being outnumbered. They relied on superior tactics, better logistics, and innovative solutions such as Carpenter's tank hunting L4 vehicle to counter the enemy threat. Tank destroyers, artillery, and armor worked in unison, with Carpenter providing crucial reconnaissance and direct attack capabilities. On September 20th, his actions came at a critical juncture when the initial German surprise had created threats to American positions. By disrupting the Panther Company's advance, Carpenter enabled time for American forces to regroup and bring reinforcements to the battlefield. His efforts not only secured tactical success, but also had significant operational implications for the overall battle. The psychological effect of his actions reverberated through German ranks, instilling fear in tank crews who previously felt relatively safe from air attacks. With American fighter bombers rarely operating in poor weather conditions, these crews now faced threats even from smaller observation aircraft. The constant requirement to scan for L4 aircraft and disperse when they were detected hindered German operations and disrupted their coordination. By November 1944, Carpenter had achieved celebrity status within the Third Army. Articles about Bazooka Charlie appeared frequently in Stars and Stripes magazine. Popular Science featured him in its February 1945 issue as part of What's New in Aviation, describing him as a Piper Cub tank buster. Liberty magazine, the New York Sun, and several other publications also highlighted his story, making him one of the most renowned pilots in the European theater. However, fame brought increased danger. German units were warned specifically about rocket-armed Cubs. Anti-aircraft defenses were bolstered with light guns and extra machine guns to counter the threat posed by L4s. Each mission became more perilous as German gunners gained experience targeting slow, moving aircraft at low altitudes. Carpenter's own remarks to reporters revealed a fatalistic outlook. "Some folks around here think I'm crazy," he said, but he believed that if they were going to fight a war, they needed to do so 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day. When questioned about the dangers involved, he merely shrugged his shoulders. "My luck has been fantastic," he stated. This luck was put to severe tests repeatedly. Beyond the incident near the church steeple mentioned in a letter home, there were other close calls. On one occasion, machine gun fire severed an elevator control cable, leaving Carpenter with minimal pitch control for his return flight to friendly territory. Another time, an anti-aircraft shell exploded nearby, peppering his aircraft with shrapnel but miraculously sparing both the pilot and critical systems. His crew chief, whose name is no longer remembered, reportedly pleaded with Carpenter to stop flying the rocket missions. The ground crew had witnessed too many L4s returning riddled with bullet holes or not coming back at all. Carpenter continued, his motivation stemmed from a blend of duty and resolve, which his fellow pilots found both awe-inspiring and worrisome. This description did not limit itself to his aerial exploits. There was one notable instance where Carpenter landed his L4 near a battlefield, picked up an abandoned M1 rifle, and joined the ground fighting. After eliminating a German column with his bazookas, he detained 6 German soldiers at gunpoint and escorted them back to American lines. Another time, when a disabled Sherman tank was under fire from Germans, Carpenter made an emergency landing nearby. He then climbed onto the tank and manned its .50 caliber machine gun, assisting in repelling a German infantry attack while the tank crew performed critical repairs. His actions that day were so commendable that the tank crew later expressed their gratitude for saving their lives. These instances of ground combat underscored Carpenter's character more broadly than just his aviation accomplishments. Even General Patton acknowledged this unique quality by personally awarding him the Silver Star, stating he wanted such fighters in his army. Additionally, Carpenter received both a Bronze Star with an oak leaf cluster and an Air Medal with another oak leaf cluster. The tales of these ground combat encounters revealed much about Carpenter's nature. He did not wish to confine himself to merely observing or serving as a flying tank destroyer. Rather, he sought direct involvement in the fight wherever it occurred, regardless of the weaponry available. While this mindset was highly commendable, it also indicated someone operating beyond reasonable boundaries. Official records confirm that Carpenter destroyed 6 tanks total, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks, along with several armored cars and trucks. Unofficial accounts from witnesses suggested the actual tally might be as high as 14 tanks destroyed or disabled. This discrepancy likely arises from the challenges of verifying kills in chaotic combat scenarios where multiple weapon systems engage the same targets. Each confirmed kill required an extraordinary alignment of circumstances, suitable weather for flying but poor enough to deter German fighter activity, precise target location and approach without detection, accurate rocket strikes on vulnerable areas, and a safe return flight. The likelihood of success was extremely low, yet he managed to achieve victory repeatedly. Consider the technical difficulties involved. Hitting a target measuring approximately 20 feet by 10 feet, the dimensions of a tank's top armor, while flying at 70 miles per hour from a distance of 100 yards using unguided rockets launched from an unstable aircraft and under enemy fire. Artillery observers who witnessed Carpenter's attacks described them as both impossible and insane. The 2 Tiger I tanks he destroyed were particularly notable achievements, given that each tank cost around 250,000 Reichsmarks to produce and required specialized crews trained for months. These tanks were considered nearly impervious to most Allied weapons. Yet, they fell to rockets fired from an aircraft that cost the US Army $500 and needed only basic pilot training to operate. Carpenter's role extended beyond tank hunting. As a reconnaissance pilot and General Wood's personal aviator, he provided vital intelligence that influenced operational decisions. His ability to fly at low altitudes and slowly, combined with his aggressive reconnaissance style, allowed him to spot German movements before other intelligence sources could. His reports impacted several key decisions during the Ardennes campaign. When German forces attempted to concentrate for counterattacks, Carpenter's early warnings enabled American commanders to position reserves and artillery in advance. His detailed observations of German defensive positions helped plan successful attacks with minimal casualties. The value of the L-4 aircraft in providing intelligence was already well established, but Carpenter's aggressive tactics yielded even more information by forcing German units to react to his presence, shooting at him, dispersing their formations, and moving into cover. He revealed positions and strengths that might otherwise have remained hidden. While his tank hunting exploits were undoubtedly dramatic, the intelligence he gathered may have been his most valuable contribution to the war effort. The information he provided saved American lives and shortened engagements that could have become prolonged battles of attrition. The success of Carpenter's improvised weapon system highlighted an intriguing aspect of World War II technology. Despite Germany's renowned reputation for advanced weaponry, it lacked a counterpart to the straightforward and efficient L-4 observation aircraft. The Wehrmacht relied on the Fieseler 456 Storch for similar roles, but this plane was larger, more intricate, and produced in far smaller quantities. In contrast, the American strategy of mass producing simple yet reliable equipment emerged as superior to Germany's focus on technological refinement. Essentially a civilian aircraft adapted with minimal military modifications, the L-4 demonstrated its effectiveness through ease of flight, maintenance, and repair using basic tools and materials. While German tank designers crafted impressive machines tailored for direct combat against enemy tanks, their vehicles were optimized for ground warfare rather than air support or unconventional tactics. The Panther's long 75 mm gun was formidable in engaging Allied tanks at ranges where it could evade counterfire, and its front armor was nearly impenetrable to most Allied weapons. However, this specialization left them vulnerable to simple American innovations like the bazooka, a quick, develop, and mass-produced weapon that provided every infantry squad with anti-tank capabilities. When Carpenter fitted 6 bazookas onto an observation plane, he created a novel weapon system that German doctrine had not accounted for and could not effectively counter. By 1945, as German awareness of rocket-armed cubs increased, Carpenter continued flying combat missions despite the risks. The Wehrmacht issued specific directives to address these aircraft, allocating anti-aircraft weapons specifically to track them whenever they appeared. During December 1944's Battle of the Bulge, Carpenter flew reconnaissance missions in extremely adverse weather conditions that grounded most planes. His intelligence reports on German troop movements were crucial for American commanders to respond effectively to this unexpected offensive. Although harsh weather limited his opportunities to engage enemy tanks directly, the valuable intelligence he gathered remained indispensable. In January 1945, as American forces launched renewed offensives towards the Rhine, Carpenter adapted his tactics continually, experimenting with various attack angles and rocket configurations. He reportedly contemplated adding extra rockets to his aircraft, but was constrained by the L-4's weight limitations and the structural integrity of its wing struts. His last confirmed tank kill occurred in February 1945 when he destroyed a Panzer IV that was defending a bridge crossing. IE witnesses described him as diving through a barrage of flak to launch his rockets at point-blank range, effectively neutralizing the threat and allowing American engineers to secure the bridge intact, thus speeding up their advance into Germany. In March 1945, Carpenter began experiencing severe fatigue and other symptoms that compelled him to cut back on his flying schedule. Medical examinations revealed advanced Hodgkin's disease, a form of cancer affecting the lymphatic system. Army doctors predicted he had only 2 years left to live. This diagnosis immediately ended his combat missions, and he was evacuated to the United States for treatment, leaving behind Rosie the Rocketer and his reputation as one of the war's most distinctive aces. Although the war continued for another 2 months after his departure, the timing may have been fortunate. As German forces became increasingly desperate in the final stages of the conflict, anti-aircraft defenses intensified significantly. Several L-4s attempting to replicate Carpenter's tactics were shot down during March and April 1945. Narrowing the window for such unconventional warfare. Carpenter received an honorable discharge from the Army in 1946 and returned to teaching history at Urbana High School in Illinois. Despite medical predictions of a short lifespan, he lived far longer than expected, resuming married life with Elder and their daughter Carol. Remarkably, he seldom discussed his wartime experiences, which only became known to his family after his death. This silence was common among combat veterans, but especially poignant given the extraordinary nature of Carpenter's service during World War II. During summer months, he operated a boys' camp in the Ozarks, where he instructed young men in various outdoor skills and character-building activities. Those who attended the camp decades ago recalled him as strict yet just demanding but nurturing. Little did anyone know that the mentor was actually one of the most highly decorated tank hunters from World War II. His health started to decline throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, What should have been a fatal diagnosis of Hodgkin's disease in 1947 turned into a prolonged battle against the illness for 2 decades. He continued his teaching work until shortly before passing away on March 20, 1966, at the age of 53. For many years after World War II, the whereabouts of Rosie, an aircraft known as a rocketer, were unknown. It was assumed that, like countless other surplus L-Force from the war, she had been dismantled and scrapped, her historical importance overlooked. However, in October 2017, aviation experts made a remarkable discovery. Serial number 43-3Tau426 was found within the Collection Aviation Museum in Bad Voslar, Austria. How it ended up there remains a mystery, but the aircraft's identity was confirmed by serial numbers and other markings. Even more astonishingly, evidence of its combat service remained intact on the aircraft, including numerous professionally repaired bullet holes. The Collins Foundation acquired Rosie in 2019 and brought her back to the United States for restoration. Historians and technicians meticulously worked to return the plane to its wartime appearance. Bullet hole patches were preserved as proof of the aircraft's involvement in combat. The restoration process also uncovered previously undocumented details about Carpenter's modifications, such as visible mounting points for bazookas on the wing struts. Examination of the patchwork indicated that bullets had struck from various angles, corroborating accounts of attacks amidst intense ground fire. Some patches overlapped, suggesting multiple repairs between missions. Despite the fact that Carpenter's bazooka armed L-4 aircraft was never officially adopted by the military, its innovative concept had a profound impact on Army aviation strategy. The notion that ground units required their own air support, independent of the priorities set by the Air Force, gained traction due to instances like Carpenter's direct battlefield interventions. During the Korean War, there were limited experiments with light-armed aircraft, but none matched Carpenter's achievements. It wasn't until the development of attack helicopters in the 1960s that his concept was truly validated. Helicopters such as the AH-1 Cobra and later the Apache helicopter exemplified this principle, serving as slow, low-altitude platforms capable of delivering precise fire support to infantry units. Contemporary military doctrine now acknowledges the effectiveness of close-range air support provided by slower-moving aircraft rather than relying solely on high-speed jet attacks. The makeshift nature of Carpenter's weapon system also inspired greater openness within the military towards field modifications and grassroots innovations driven by soldiers. The U.S. Armed forces became more receptive to bottom-up improvements, recognizing that combat troops often devised practical solutions unforeseen by engineers. In 2023, Major Charles Carpenter's daughter, Carol Archie, co-authored Bazooka Charlie with aviation writer James P. Busher, revealing the true story behind the legend based on hundreds of preserved letters and photographs. The book depicted a multifaceted individual who was both brave and cautious, aggressive yet thoughtful. The correspondence revealed someone deeply aware of the moral complexities of war while remaining resolute in fulfilling his duties. One particularly poignant letter written after destroying an enemy tank reflected on the humanity of his adversaries. They were somebody's sons, maybe fathers themselves, but they tried to kill my friends, and I couldn't let that happen. This combination of emotional intelligence and tactical acumen set Carpenter apart from other warriors. Carol Archie described her father as a peaceful man who compartmentalized his wartime experiences. She mentioned in interviews that he had emotionally moved on. According to her, my mother endured a difficult period waiting for him to return home after 4 years. He seemed devastated when he came back from the war. A bronze statue was unveiled at Moline High School in 2023, depicting Carpenter's alongside his L-4 aircraft. The unveiling ceremony attracted attendees such as veterans, historians, and aviation enthusiasts from various parts of the country. Former pupils from his teaching days, now elderly, recalled him as a dedicated teacher who never spoke about his wartime exploits. The American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts, which houses the restored Rosie the Rocketer, has created an extensive exhibit highlighting Carpenter's military service. Visitors can see the actual aircraft riddled with bullet holes and learn about the individual who transformed an observation plane into a tank destroyer. The Experimental Aircraft Association includes Carpenter's story in their educational programs, emphasizing his innovative spirit as a prime example of American ingenuity and determination. Young pilots are taught not only about his tactical successes, but also about the creative problem-solving that can turn limitations into advantages. Military historians continue to examine Carpenter's tactics and their influence on the Lorraine campaign. Although his 6 confirmed tank kills may appear modest compared to the thousands destroyed during World War II, the psychological and strategic impact was significant beyond numerical measures. How did a history teacher with no specific combat training become one of the war's most distinctive aces? The answer lies in several unique circumstances that rarely converge. First, serving as General Wood's personal pilot granted him exceptional freedom to pursue his own strategies. Most L4 pilots adhered strictly to assigned reconnaissance missions and schedules. Carpenters could seek out targets opportunistically, selecting both timing and location strategically. Secondly, his teaching experience likely contributed to his tactical acumen. History teaches grasp patterns, causal relationships, and the importance of timing in historical events. Applying these analytical skills to combat allowed Carpenter to identify weaknesses that others might overlook. Thirdly, the particular circumstances of the Lorraine campaign provided opportunities for his distinctive strategies. The open terrain, the concentration of German armor, and the dynamic nature of the battle meant that there were targets available if one dared to engage them. Moreover, and perhaps most crucially, Carpenter possessed a rare blend of bravery and fatalism that enabled him to repeatedly take extreme risks. His statement about attacking for an hour each day and 24 hours a week underscores someone who had accepted the probability of death but chose to make every moment count. A closer examination of Carpenter's combat record reveals the extraordinary nature of his accomplishments. He officially destroyed 6 tanks, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks. Multiple armored vehicles and trucks were also destroyed. On September 20, 1944 alone, he fired 16 rockets in 3 sorties. Approximately 100 combat missions were flown, with no L4 Grasshoppers lost despite numerous bullet strikes on his aircraft. One pilot managed to survive under conditions that should have been nearly impossible. Each statistic represents dozens of life or death decisions, any one of which could have ended fatally. Carpenter's survival throughout his combat tour defied the odds. Contemporary pilots attempting similar tactics rarely survived more than a few missions. The financial equation was equally remarkable. The total cost of Carpenter's L4 Grasshopper and modifications was less than 5,000. Each Tiger tank he destroyed cost over 250,000 Reichsmarks to produce, not including training crews and transportation costs. In purely economic terms, Carpenter achieved one of the highest return on investment ratios during the war. Despite extensive documentation, some aspects of Carpenter's story remain enigmatic. How did he maintain psychological stability while continuing such perilous missions? What motivated him to venture beyond the already dangerous realm of observation, flying into direct combat? His letters offer some hints but fall short of providing a comprehensive explanation. He wrote extensively about his sense of duty, the need to safeguard his fellow soldiers, and his desire for the war to conclude so he could return home. However, these reasons, though commendable, do not fully account for the extraordinary risks he took. Perhaps the answer lies in the historical context of his generation. Men who fought in World War II had endured the Great Depression, learning firsthand about hardship and sacrifice. They had witnessed the rise of fascism and recognized it as a grave threat to democracy. For someone like Carpenter, who taught history and understood the gravity of the situation, half-hearted measures were not an option. Alternatively, perhaps the explanation is simpler. In war, ordinary individuals sometimes perform extraordinary deeds because the circumstances demand it. Carpenter saw a problem: German tanks killing Americans, and found a solution even if it seemed highly improbable. The fact that his solution involved flying a fabric, cover aircraft into close range of enemy guns was simply an acceptable risk. Carpenter's innovations impacted more than just military tactics. They became part of American folklore celebrating ingenuity. This narrative emphasized the idea that a resourceful individual with basic tools could overcome sophisticated enemy technology through sheer determination and creative thinking. It resonated particularly strongly in post-war America as the nation sought to comprehend its victory over seemingly insurmountable enemies. Carpenter's story served as an ideal metaphor for David versus Goliath, symbolizing American practicality and individual initiative triumphing over German engineering and military tradition. This narrative also influenced how the military approached innovation, making them more receptive to unconventional ideas from junior officers or enlisted personnel rather than dismissing them outright. The lesson of Bazooka Charlie was clear. Occasionally, the most effective solutions arise from individuals who are intimately familiar with a particular issue. For the aviation sector, Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter's exploits highlighted the adaptability of lightweight aircraft. Originally intended as training and recreational planes, Piper Cubs had demonstrated capabilities far beyond their initial design parameters. This flexibility would go on to shape post-war aircraft development, inspiring designers to consider various potential applications for their creations. Carpenter's tale challenges traditional military narratives. An instructor flying an unarmed observation plane should not have been capable of destroying German heavy tanks. A fabric-covered aircraft equipped with a mere 65 horsepower engine shouldn't have endured multiple combat missions amidst ground fire. 6 bazookas affixed to wing struts hardly seemed like an effective arsenal. Yet, between September 1944 and February 1945, all of these improbable feats occurred. Carpenter transformed the L-4 Grasshopper from a passive observation aircraft into an active combat vehicle. His official record includes 6 destroyed tanks, with 2 being Tiger I models, an accomplishment considered one of the most extraordinary in military aviation history. The sound of small aircraft engines struck fear into German forces stationed at Arnhem and across the Ardennes campaign. What were once thought to be harmless spotters became potential aerial threats. Tank crews, who felt relatively safe from American fighter bombers, which typically avoided poor weather or low-altitude operations, now faced a new danger they could not easily counteract: the shift in German tactics, from disregarding L-4s to actively engaging them with every available means, illustrates the strategic impact of one pilot's ingenuity. Carpenter compelled the Wehrmacht to adapt its anti-aircraft defenses, disperse armored units more widely, and maintain constant vigilance against slow-moving aircraft. These adjustments disrupted German operations and contributed significantly to American successes during the Ardennes campaign. Beyond military achievements, Carpenter's story exemplifies the triumph of creativity over conventional thinking. Confronted with the challenge posed by German armor, he devised an unprecedented solution using readily available materials and unwavering determination. The bazookas were originally designed for infantry use. The L-4 was originally intended for reconnaissance purposes. When paired with someone willing to take immense risks, it evolved into a vehicle far beyond what its designers or military strategists ever envisioned. Rosie the Rocketer, now showcased with its battle scars intact, serves as a powerful symbol of American ingenuity and personal bravery. Every patched bullet hole tells a story of moments when failure seemed inevitable. Nonetheless, Carpenter pushed forward with his assault. The aircraft that should have been destroyed numerous times managed to survive and convey its tale to future generations. Charles Carpenter passed away in 1966, outliving the medical prognosis he received by 19 years. During those additional decades, he dedicated himself to educating young Americans about history, perhaps hoping they would grasp that ordinary individuals can accomplish extraordinary feats under challenging circumstances. His students recalled him as strict yet fair, unaware that their instructor was a former high school teacher who had revolutionized aerial warfare through sheer determination and innovation. The German tank crews who encountered him in France would have been astonished to learn that their adversary was a history educator. They might also have found it equally surprising to discover that the weapon system that caused them such fear consisted merely of 6 infantry bazookas mounted on a civilian aircraft. Yet perhaps they could relate to the broader lesson. In warfare, creativity, bravery, and resolve can triumph over seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The L4 Grasshopper that hunted panthers and tigers of France demonstrated that David could still best Goliath, provided he had 6 slingshots and the courage to wield them at close range. Ultimately, this may be the most crucial lesson from Bazooka Charlie's experiences. Human ingenuity and unyielding courage can transform even modest tools into instruments of victory.